flying to the factory. Iron clothes look so shady.
Yeah, man, the great Sugar Minot in the background right here, the late, great Sugar Minot, right here on WUSB Stony Brook. As always, we started off with The Prisoner. This is Finn, and this is Finn's Revolution until 9 p.m. And we are lucky enough to have author Waifette with us. Waifette, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Finn.
And it's fantastic to have you on board here on WUSB. So you have been writing for a while now. First of all, before we get into the book,
okay.
What exactly? Tell us how you got into writing. Is this something you're a late bloomer, an early? What's the story?
I'm definitely an early bloomer. I definitely was writing as early as I was reading, which was like 4 to 5. So
Okay.
I remember in kindergarten, a friend and I used to just hide under the table in recess and put little pieces of paper together and staple it into little books that we would then write and illustrate and think we could sell them, but nobody's really interested in buying books in kindergarten. So, we were just kind of getting our little kicks ourselves by just acting out being writers. And then as I got older, I was into creative writing. I did a lot of stuff with high school. And in college, it was just kind of an independent thing. I did it by myself. Didn't really become very active as a writer, actually, until about 3 years ago when I started promoting Cigarettiquette.
Okay. So as far as influences in your writing, who were your early influences? I'm not talking about in kindergarten necessarily, but a little further on.
Okay. Biggest literary influence, I'd have to say, is Kerouac. I'm a huge fan of the beat movement. I like breaking boundaries. I like talking about the things people don't like to talk about. Also really big into, Shakespeare, the classics. I have a wide... If you come to my house, you'll see that I have like a massive book collection, books upon books upon books. So
Well, you have to give us all your address and we'll come to your house.
I could definitely chew your ear off about the influences, but Kerouac for sure is the
Okay,
main.
so the beats are a big thing.
Yeah.
Naturally. As a matter of fact, for a few years, not the last 2 for various scheduling reasons, we always did a live broadcast from down in Northport at Gunther's Tavern.
Yes.
During Cow Harbor Day, which is right around Kerouac's birthday.
I've heard a lot about the Kerouac events that they have in Northport.
Yeah, so we've done a few live broadcasts from there, which is very cool. We always love to do that, and big Kerouac fan myself. Okay, so you went to school where?
I actually
Here.
started my college experience at Stony Brook. I was
Okay.
here for about 2.5 years.
And then you escaped?
Yes. Then
Very good.
I ran and was hoping to never look back. But then I ended up moving out to Long Island for work in 2011. And that took me kind of back home, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And I started getting involved with the poetry scene on Long Island a little bit less than a year ago.
Okay, and there's lots of good groups, and you're currently kind of working with...
I'm a frequenter at the Music Exchange,
Right.
but I do go to the PPA events, different Bards Initiative events, all different Long Island poetry events, and even New York City when time permits and scheduling, is there for me to do that.
So at these events, you're reading both prose and poems, or what's going on?
Lately, I have been mixing in a little bit of excerpts from the book just
Okay.
to do a little bit of self-promotion, but I mostly stick to the poetry. I try to stick to whatever format the event announces itself as.
Obviously.
Try to be respectful to the aura of the event.
Sure.
So I
Okay.
mix it up.
Okay. So the history of the book that's out now, Cigarettiquette.
It is quite a long history.
Go ahead.
Started writing the book, I'd say, around 2007, 2008. So it was a work in progress for many years. And the idea kind of came about through the Lorax, the idea of the Lorax.
Dr. Seuss.
And the Lorax being, the little creature that speaks up for the trees because they're unable to speak for themselves or there's nobody to speak for them. And from my perspective, smokers are a lot like trees because either people are unwilling to not condone or promote being a smoker, but to defend the rights and joys and lifestyle of being a smoker. And starting smoking around 18, it was something that I identified with very strongly. It became crucial to my independence and my individuality, and that was something that I found myself kind of coming back to in my writing. So it kind of came as like a short story idea, and then the short story became a longer short story, and then a novella, and then it became this growing thing that I had to do something with. I felt it needed to be out there.
Okay. And you live on Long Island now, right?
Yes,
What town do you live in?
I live in Huntington.
Okay. So Huntington, not so much, but most of Long Island, not very smoker-friendly.
No.
Huntington is not either. It's just the current climate we live in, but a little more so. I think there was for a few years, and I don't know if there still is, but there was like some kind of hookah bar or something there.
Actually, you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes in hookah bars anywhere.
Yeah, but I mean tobacco, though, was available.
They're still around. You could still find hookah bars out here and like tobacco shops where you can smoke inside.
Right.
Because I believe if you sell, if 85% of your revenue comes from tobacco, then you're allowed to get a license for indoor use. But not a lot of places do, or there's not enough interest for a place to sustain itself.
As opposed to in the city where there's a lot more of those kinds of venues.
Yes.
I have to tell you, where I live in Astoria, there's up until about 2 years ago, it's a big Greek neighborhood, a big European neighborhood, and it was very rare that most of the bars paid attention to the city ordinances. They would just take the fines because the community wouldn't come out unless they could smoke in the bar.
Mm-hmm. Well, I find, and through talking with a lot of smokers, especially for the research for the book, a lot of people have said they miss the days when you, as a business owner, could decide if you wanted to ban smoking or not. Because even before it was across the board no smoking, places would still be like, I don't like smoking. I don't want it in my establishment. They'd put up their signage, and you knew that was a non-smoking bar. And there was always a place you could go that was a smoking bar. So both subsets of society were catered to. Nowadays, it's more the... it's too big of a risk to break the law or to find a way around it, and it's just not advantageous as a business owner anymore.
Exactly. It's a PC issue, unfortunately, and it definitely is I'm not a smoker myself, but it's certainly a curtailment of some rights and enjoyment. If something is legal to purchase, you should be able to enjoy it somewhere other than in the bathroom of your house, the porch of your house in the middle of winter, right?
Yeah, I would certainly hope so.
Yeah, so that's problematic, and it's kind of a shame that certain things. I mean, you can even look at films. Films. People don't smoke in films as much anymore, except rare films.
There actually is a requirement now that if cigarettes are depicted in a film, it has to be a minimum rated R. It has to be rated R now to even have a cigarette smoking character, which to me is very strange, but
very strange.
It's the world we live in.
That's right, very strange. Okay, so let's talk about the book itself and how it has grown. How did you started writing? I'm assuming about your own life and experience, right?
Yes. After I left Stony Brook, I was kind of a loner back home, commuting back and forth from my parents' house, and didn't really form the social networks that I formed while I was living away at school at Stony Brook. So I kind of took to myself and my writing. And that was when my smoking was a little bit on the heavy side because I was by myself all the time in between classes. That was kind of how I filled my time. Okay. And as such, I was thinking about it a lot, or thinking about the next time I'd be smoking or reflections during my smoke break, etc. So it started off, like I said, as a short story. And then I decided I would start doing a little bit of outside research about tobacco to maybe supplement a little bit of historical fact, and then it kind of grew into something that was way bigger than I ever intended, and I still technically don't even think is finished, but I guess I could add to it forever.
Like Walt Whitman.
Like Walt Whitman, yes. So I did it at some point around, I think 2012 it was, decide, okay, I'm done, I'm going to work on publishing this now. And it became a self-publishing endeavor because I knew nobody was going to stand up and be like, I want to publish this book that openly is not against smoking, that is almost pro-smoking, that might have a lot of backlash, which I myself have experienced slight backlash already. I get hate tweets, I get emails.
Hate tweets?
Hate tweets, but I guess that's how you know you've made it, because, people start
People are
sending
taking
you
the time
tweets.
to hate you, that's important.
So, kind of grew from there, and I actually received the funding to self-publish through Kickstarter, through the generosity of people who I both know and don't know, which was really exciting. People all over the world would be like, I commend you for standing up and doing this. I feel exactly as you do. And it was really inspiring for me to be able to connect to a whole group of people that I would not have otherwise connected with, and get some fans and meet some people. And it's been a really awesome experience.
Great. That's fantastic. All right, so the actual writing process itself, how did it start? You're writing initially, and when did you kind of realize you had to keep writing about this subject?
Okay. Well, everything I write always starts off by hand because I'm very old school. I like to see crossouts. I like my process to be visible. For me, the issue with technology and computers is once you write a first draft and you change it in Word, it's gone. That first draft is not saved anywhere unless you actively change a draft 1, draft 2, draft 3, and save them all independently. So for me, I wrote it in a notebook. It was a marble notebook that I would take with me everywhere. I would write in it when I smoked. If I overheard people talking about something interesting while they were smoking, I would write about that. I would go to the library for hours and read about the history of tobacco all over the world. I would take notes. It just became this thing that I was working on. And then all of a sudden, one day, it kind of took a form, and I started breaking it up into chapters and going back and adding to the chapters. And eventually, I had 200 plus words about how awesome I think smoking is. And here we are today, and I'm finally able to call myself an author. So it's pretty exciting.
Okay. All right, you want to read us a little something? Maybe from the, you can read whatever you'd like, but I'd like to hear something about maybe some snippet section of how you started.
Okay, I can hook that up. Let me just find that chapter. Just bear with me. I probably should have done this ahead of time, but I didn't.
Now, while you were thumbing through, I'm assuming you've seen the great film, the Coffee and Cigarettes by James Jarmusch.
Yes, I have.
One of my favorite films.
It's amazing.
And of course, Smoke and with Lou Reed and.
That I have not actually seen. No,
those
that
are great
I have
films.
not seen.
All about running a tobacco shop, and the people you meet in them.
I actually have a bit in the book about how awesome I think tobacco shops are, not only for the products that you get exposed to, but for the types of people that run them and hang out in them. You'll always find that old smoker that just sits there with his paper. Some of these places actually do have bars as well. So he'll sit there with his paper and drink and smoke a cigarette, and it's a very a visceral experience for me. Thank you.
Yeah, but he's turned the lights on so Waifette can actually read in here in my usual dungeon setting that I have the lights at.
Okay, all right. So this is from a chapter in the book which does deal with my beginnings in smoking, and the name of the chapter is Rebirth and Reawakening. My love affair with cigarettes began somewhere in my 18th year. That first cigarette was one of the most important and intense moments of my adult life. I still lived with my parents on my 18th birthday, which fell in the middle of my senior year of high school. Most of the people I knew in high school were non-smokers, and back then I always said no to cigarettes. Not because I had been brainwashed against them by the DARE program, which I had been through 2 times in elementary and middle school, or the elongated anti-smoking segment of health class. In fact, these programs only heightened my curiosity about tobacco. I said no because I was a varsity swimmer, and varsity swimmers weren't supposed to smoke. I said no because I was an honor student, and honor students weren't supposed to smoke. I said no because I was a pianist, and pianists weren't supposed to smoke. Admittedly, I never felt strongly inclined to smoke cigarettes in any real way, but I also didn't feel repulsed by them either. Most of the people I considered friends at the time were straight-edge kids anyway, and strictly against indulging in those nasty things like drugs, alcohol, and tobacco, so I simply took on that stance so I would fit in. In those high school years, I was like a gas taking on the shape of my container, because it was safe to do so. And as long as I did as I was told, I wouldn't rock the boat too badly or shift my world irreparably. I would eventually learn that sometimes trouble is already waiting for you before you even think to start it or look for it. The tide just suddenly comes in high and pushes the boat wherever it pleases. So there I found myself some months later, a freshman in college, on my first date with Paul, my first love, and a man with whom I would linger for years after that cigarette. It all started with a real spark. He and I existed in totally different worlds. He was a 20-year-old history major with a passion for life to match mine and an appetite for adventure. He was free in all the ways I wished to be, and it was he who guided me through these awkward periods of rapid growth and change that really contributed to my development as an autonomous identity, as a unique personality, as a young woman, and as a human being. I was a good girl off of college, away from mommy and daddy for more than just a couple days for the very first time, trying to break out of my shell and needing desperately to be told that it was okay to just be myself. And I would find that in Paul. He handed me a Parliament Light on November 2nd, 2002, in his car somewhere near Stony Brook University. We were both students there. A song he enjoyed came on the speakers, and he did this cute little jump in his seat, exclaiming, "Oh man, this is an awesome song to smoke to," while he excitedly grabbed his pack from the small square space above his CD player. I remember not quite understanding that sentiment. How can something be awesome to smoke to? In time, I would learn. Paul brought a filter to his lips, twirling it around on the way up to his mouth, and extended the cigarette box to me. It lingered in the air near my chest, clutched tightly by his bony fingers, and he asked with a slow, seductive whisper, "Cigarette?" I grabbed one shakily from the box, thanking him, reveling in the idea that he had no idea that I had no idea how to use it and had never smoked one before. In that moment, I experienced deceit, discovery, and liberation unparalleled to anything I had ever experienced before. I fell in love with smoking when he held a lighter to the end of the barrel as I held it tightly between my lips and executed my first timid puff. The music blared on as he placed his hand on my thigh for the very first time, and smoke swirled all around me until I was dizzy from spinning in my own clouds. Through the course of our relationship, we would go on to smoke and share thousands of cigarettes together. In the car, during walks, outside stores, on his patio, between classes, in the quad, while we adventured, in my dorm room, after sex, after meals, all the time. He always reeked of faint cologne and old cigarettes, and so did his car. It was intoxicating. I thank him for handing me fire and smoke and sharing the smoker identity with me. It's something he gave me that I have always felt I could hold on to if I wished, both tangibly and in my heart, and I did.
Very cool, very cool. Do you remember? I'm sure you do, but do you remember what the song was?
It was actually, I know that it was by Unwritten Law.
Okay.
And it was, one of the lines was, "Let's smoke some cigarettes and light up a roach on the back porch," or something like that. It was very like, it made sense that he wanted to smoke to that song, but I honestly don't remember the name of it.
Very good. Very cool. Very cool. Well, that's really interesting. Now, obviously, that situation works for these days for a smaller niche of people. Yet, and once again, you mentioned the DARE program and all those different kinds of old school things. Yet, these are all what you're mentioning are the classic rites of passage that have existed for a very, very long time, many, many, many years. And it's like a very retro thing.
It is.
At the same time, right?
It is. Although now people are moving along to the electronic cigarettes,
right,
which I myself dabble in as well. But it's very strange. I'm still learning the ins and outs of the vape culture, and it's a lot of people who are vapors. It's entirely separate. They are not smokers, but some people do it as a transition or a substitute. So that's kind of where I'm researching new writing ideas at the moment.
That's a whole different thing, right?
Yeah.
And actually a big and up-and-coming thing, huge. Okay. All right, so you get going with this initial experience of writing a little about your history, and you get to a point where you're accumulating enough stuff where you realize you're on a path, so to speak.
And then I actually opened it up to the public, where I started doing interviews with people I both knew and didn't know of their first experiences smoking and or their last, because a lot of people were ex-smokers that still wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
And I do find when it comes to smoking, once you become a smoker, it's like something you are forever. Even if you're an ex-smoker, you still feel the need to define yourself in some way with regard to smoking. So people always have this, "Oh, well, I quit, but I wish I could smoke," or "It's the best thing I ever did." It's always something that's a very forefront type of thing in their identity, whether or not they smoked, why they still do or don't, and that was very interesting to me, and how that differed by age group, by location, so it was very, very cool process.
Okay, so within the book, do you speak in their voices, or are you speaking in your own voice?
I speak in my own voice, but I do use opinions and concepts and stories that were given to me by others with release, obviously, proper legal release. So, it's a really, I think it's an awesome project, and a lot of different people are representative within it.
So some of the people you've interviewed who've read the work here, how do they feel about how it all has come out?
I haven't really gotten to pick the brains of too many of them. I know one of them is my dear best friend in the whole world, so it's not an objective opinion. So I didn't even bother to really be like, "Well, so what do you think?" Because he kind of knew the whole thing from the beginning anyway.
Right.
So I'm still early enough. The book's only been out for about a month now, almost exactly. It actually yesterday, a month ago, was the date it came out. So I'm still kind of getting my feet on the ground with sales and getting feedback. I got my first Amazon review last week, so
very cool.
That was a milestone, and so it's happening, and it's very exciting.
All right, so the book has been available on Amazon,
yes,
right? And I think currently it's not available. You're actually out of. Are you out of?
No, currently it is available on Amazon, but not through me physically.
Understood.
I'm physically sold out of copies. I've been buying copies to bring to poetry readings and different places I go, and just when I'm in the grocery store and someone's buying a cigarette, I just wrote a book about awesome smoking. It's so did you? Oh yeah,
well,
I have some copies in my trunk.
That is absolutely great news that your own copies have sold out.
Yes, so that's very exciting, and I'm about to place a new order. So if you want to,
yeah, we'll do that. We'll give away a couple.
That's awesome.
Towards the end of the thing. All right. Why don't you read another section of whatever you want to read about from the book. And this is from, once again, Cigarettiquette, which is available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
And you can get yourself a copy of it. And once again, to me, I am not personally a smoker, and I have not been. However, I find this a lot of the laws that have occurred, and many of you, we've discussed this, a lot of the laws that have occurred have been nothing but punitive towards civil liberties and all the rest of those things, and a little freedom for some individuals under the onus of protecting the masses. But it'd be wonderful if there were in every community certain spaces for smoking, for example, to take place in a relaxed, civil.
I wholeheartedly concur.
Social environment like a bar or what have you. But these days in New York State, among other places, it's certainly less likely you will find that. In New York City, you'll find some of that, but not too often. So I'm 100% in favor of any type of alternate culture development. It's a good thing.
Okay.
Waifette, why don't you read us something?
Okay. Because many people, the first thing they'll say to me is, but don't you know how bad smoking is for you?
Right.
I'm going to read from the part of my book that actually addresses that, because that's the biggest question I get is, do you acknowledge the health risks of smoking? And the answer is yes, I do. That's not the point of the work, but it is something that I'm not living under a rock and I have to acknowledge. So without further ado, the name of the chapter is The Bad News. Cigarettes have been proven to have negative effects on almost every aspect of the human anatomy. Tobacco is one of the leading causes of preventable death in the United States. Smoking kills more people than HIV, illicit drug abuse, alcohol abuse, motor vehicle accidents, suicide, and murder combined. Cigarettes are also considered to be more addictive than heroin or cocaine. Among the diseases cigarette smoking is said to cause or increase the severity of, we find some really fun stuff, like lung cancer, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, infections of the lower respiratory tract, asthma, various respiratory infections, cancers of the esophagus, larynx, mouth, bladder, kidney, stomach, pancreas, cervix, and colon, various forms of coronary ailments, including angina, heart attack, arrhythmia, and aortic aneurysm, premature wrinkling, fingernail discoloration, psoriasis, delayed wound healing, osteoporosis, and osteoarthritis, middle ear infections, Crohn's disease, impaired delivery of oxygen to body tissues, infertility, miscarriage, earlier onset of menopause, decreased sperm motility, impotence, worsened multiple sclerosis, depression, snoring, hearing loss, cataracts, periodontal disease, and ulcers. And I want to smoke anyway, because some people say everybody's got to die eventually. And smoking takes off the bad years. Don't we have the right to death? If we view smoking as slow suicide, the debate arises as to whether or not human beings should be allowed to willingly poison their own bodies over time if they wish, engaging essentially in a pastime that's lethal. I'd rather content my mind than be a slave to my body. My brain whirls and sparks when I smoke. My spirit swirls and swells. Part of what drives me in life is knowing that I have control over certain aspects of it. What I choose to ingest is, to a degree, one of those things. Tobacco is a substance that I am legally permitted to consume in the United States of America as a 30-year-old woman, and I choose to do so. I genuinely enjoy and appreciate the act of smoking cigarettes. Smokers know they're having an amazing night if they smoke more cigarettes than usual, but by the same token, a good night can also mean smoking less. If you are totally enthralled in something, it sometimes takes the place of that cigarette rush. And when you finally do smoke at the completion of whatever it was, that cigarette is like heaven. I smoke in my car sometimes with all 4 windows down as far as they will go, with bits of ash billowing across the dashboard, lit dimly green by the odometer, and with the vibrant plethora of lights and signs and trees and motion along a dead road. The smoke hits the windshield and recoils and twists into and around me before it dissipates. It is during moments like this that I am the most at peace.
Beautiful, beautiful writing.
Thank you.
Really, really nice.
I really appreciate it.
Sometimes you get caught up in the subject because we're discussing a subject, but the writing itself is really beautiful. You're really
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. It means a lot.
All right. How about you're also a writer of poetry?
Yes.
And you have a poetry book coming out shortly. Is that correct?
Yes, it's going to be coming out this year. The name is Poet. It's kind of a take off my stage name, Waifette. And it's just a collection of poetry starting in high school through present day.
Okay.
So I'm very excited about it. It's being published by Boonstock Press, which is a local press out of Amityville. So that's exciting. Not a self-publishing venture, so that's pretty cool.
That's right. Someone's actually paying to publish your stuff.
Yes.
That's great.
So that's another milestone. And so I'm very thrilled.
Can we hear something from that?
Absolutely. Let me just think.
Yeah, whatever you like.
Well, let's pick something a little uplifting. Just bear with me. I want to find something radio appropriate. I tend to
radio appropriate.
I tend to use nasty language in my poetry. So I want to make sure I don't use that nasty language on the internet or on the radio because I have a reputation to uphold. Okay.
Well, I don't know if I have a reputation to uphold, but.
Well, this piece is my masterpiece, I like to call it. It's inspired by Howl, by Allen Ginsberg, and it's called Scream. It's I actually wanted it to be line for line, but that's going to be a huge undertaking, so you could consider it a work in progress.
Okay.
And I'm going to edit any bad words as I come across them.
Very good.
Okay. Scream. I've seen the spirits of dreamers around me shattered, unemployed and broken, starving, scattered. I've heard their screaming as they're being dashed apart by the million broken promises of youth, seeming comforting, but they're teeming at the seams with seeds of doubt, and soon enough, the hidden phantoms start appearing throughout. I've seen the tragic hipsters, the wide-eyed somnambulists, who glow orange against their lit-bummed cigarettes at night, their teeth chattering and grinding, naked bathed in solemn truth and bright clandestine light, carving their paths carefully out of the blurry firmament with unwavering might. Sparkling horizon meets starry dark as their fighting plights in silence, stark raving mad, lost, hark! Howling for proof in the rain, lamenting expired creative spark, rioting, reeking of buried disdain, thriving only in suffering, doused in this life teeny's sour vodka vermouth with no olive to chew as their hands wring themselves raw into claws, drunk on their own disasters again, higher on trouble than any drug could drag them, doubled under laws just trying to keep sane, who shudder under headphones at how difficult it has become to reach adulthood. Insane. This becomes their constant bane, they, who hide in apartments they can barely afford, $2,000 a month shoeboxes, struggling, everything inside now a part of a small hoard, holding on for dear life to the little they have, not knowing if there will be more found, or just the echo of the hard slam shut of the heaviest, most unwavering, unmerciful doors, crushing their calves. Who loiter around corporate coffee houses, clutching close the ideas that so badly need to be revealed, who hold hostage in their hearts magic passion and art so real, the fire and spark of change ideal, who drink stolen fountain soda under the guise of free tap water, who waste away like discarded rubbish on freeways, squatters, waiting to be rescued from the sting of survival, who vandalize buildings for a vocation, tagging and stickering as a means toward recognition, the genius, unnoticed, never-ending condition, who harness themselves to the possibility that success comes to those who are deserved of it, painting in ill-lit tenements, drafting in the scores of forgotten notebooks, creating hidden treasures, who exercise their right to gather and protest, klaxon clamor they think they know best, who get maced by police, kneecaps hammered, knocked down, and locked away for their beliefs, who find no peace in our system as it stands, no child left behind, a glaring lie they don't understand, for who came back for them? Who came back for the 30-year college loans, for the dismantled credit scores, for the repossessed, for the jobless, homeless, and under arrest? Who hide behind the veils of maturity, playing house in a world unaffordable, who should star in the center light of our sphere, held in the palms of hands as movers, life improvers, but instead are marked ill-doers, do-nothings, who find things, flawed as they are, not to be revered, find themselves unmarketable, find themselves unprofitable, find the odds are impossible, who write poetry like wild winds and write phrases on dirty napkins in mental hospitals, children of Carl Solomon, who pray to ancient gods and last resort to regain lost chances, glances, and romances, who slay solid institutions with their words, musical beautiful, whirling in dervish advances, who find themselves lost from the system they're tossed to the wolves, waiting to shred any scrap of dignity embossed in their souls, who set goals only to discover that goals are for those who can afford to achieve them, who wait in ERs for toothaches denied Medicaid, who have wounds they're unable to cover with Band-Aids, who need help but are told to stick it out and just find their own way, who can't recall the folds of the womb as they forge wavering paths to their tomb, stuck in the solid muck of life stuff, who are tired and trodden and can't earn a living, dealing with disease, addiction, poverty, and distant impossible opportunity, who cry like banshees for some relief, dying of overdoses, needles hanging from their arms in the streets, who dance in the wash of dim road posts, counting change at counters for a pack of smokes, and processed garbage to ingest through their tourniquets, who know in their bones it can be better than this, who know in their bones it must be made better than this, who pick at the scabs left behind by bitter mistakes, who stick to the plans specified by magistrates, who find in doing so their psyches break. I am with you in Rockland, all of you, descendants of Carl Solomon, who blaze through the streets, who parade the corridors of this trodden earth. I am with you in Rockland. I am with you in Rockland, where all is dead at night, save for the remnants of those screams, the cold, petrified residue of dreams.
We've had beautiful, beautiful echoing tribute there to Howl by Ginsberg.
Thank you.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to be back in a moment, and we're going to read some more, I guess, from Cigarettiquette.
Okay.
And then we're going to give away a couple of copies of Cigarettiquette by Waifette right here. So just stay tuned. We're going to hear a little more Sugar Minot, and we'll be right back.
I can't see the balls, not even big man I can't. They must see why me commit robbery. Boy, apply it to the factory. I'm on clothes look so shabby. Boy, no vacancy.
Yeah, kids, a little Sugar Minot right here. The late, great just passed away last year on us, and one of my favorites. And, Waifette has been joining us, reading some selections from her, both Cigarettiquette and also from her upcoming poetry collection, which is called Poet. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct.
Okay. You can get a copy of Cigarettiquette right on
my website, there's a link. It's waifette.com/cigarettiquette.
Very good.
And Waifette is actually spelled Waifette for those of you who are unfamiliar with my stage name.
Very good. And, of course, also on Amazon. But, this way you can get a copy as soon as possible because it's a great, great, great book. And she's a really, really interesting writer. And it's not just subject matter, as we were just discussing. It's also the quality of the writing, which is really, really beautiful. Waifette, and in a few minutes, I think we're going to give away a couple of copies. But, Waifette, can you possibly read something else from Cigarettiquette?
Absolutely. I will read my favorite section, which actually harkens us back in time a little bit to when smoking was cool.
Okay.
And the name of this chapter is Parents' Parties. I smoke a cigarette in Brooklyn beside my dear friend Bill, an elder from a different time, as he tells me about what it was like for him growing up in another kind of social world and his early notions about cigarettes. I make myself comfortable on his red couch as he tells me the stories of his youth, of a freer time with regard to smoking, amid remnants of old memorabilia from that time. I realize just how much I would have loved to have been alive in those days. My association with cigarettes as romantic things, he begins, as something sophisticated and adult and just something that was in the background all the time. Well, it was a standard medium in my youth. It was the calm place between people in excited states and was generally accepted as such. So, the cops arrest a man, and, he's just robbed a bank and murdered 4 people, and he's shackled in chains in the back of the cop car, and the cops start to smoke. They want to get him to talk, so they'll offer him a cigarette, barking, "Here, smoke this, tell us what happened." It's like, even if we're going to give you nothing else, we'll let you have cigarettes at least. It's like we understand. It wasn't just an addiction back then, it was a currency. Of course, it's still a currency in prisons, but on the outside, it's really a social currency. There's nothing monetary about it. Because, of course, back when I was a kid, even with inflation, blah, 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 cigarettes were still much cheaper. I mean, they've gone up exponentially, so much higher than average inflation, probably in large part due to taxes. So giving somebody a cigarette, at least, in the firmly established middle class of the 60s, was just nothing. It didn't matter. That person didn't owe you a thing. It was like toilet paper. They were like 50, 75 cents a pack when I was 11 or 12, maybe $1, no more than $1. I think when they went up to $1 a pack, I was already 13. When I was a kid, my parents used to throw parties, and the common currency at these parties, along with alcohol, was cigarettes. And you wanted to make it easy for people to have the cigarettes. So, of course, they had these candy dishes out. But they weren't ordinary candy dishes. They were special dishes made just for cigarettes. We had several of them, and they were beautiful. That's the thing. They would be the sexiest, prettiest presenting dishes or cups you could imagine. They'd be these glowing, ruby, sparkling things which looked deeply seductive to the eye. There would be lighters and fancy matches around. I remember the table would have, a nice-sized dish that held maybe 30, 40 cigarettes, at least a couple of packs in this large dish. They would just fill them up with cigarettes, and there would be a decorative lighter there and sort of a heavy ashtray, almost like a paperweight, but not that heavy, that had its own stand so it wouldn't tip over. Now, when my parents quit, they got rid of all this stuff, of course, but I just remember smoking as this wonderful, forbidden thing, and it was one of those things you wanted to do. If you were a girl, you wanted to wear lipstick and have boobs and smoke, and if you were a guy, you wanted to be able to really hit a baseball hard and wear a suit and smoke. That was just part of adulthood, growing body hair and smoking. It was the thing that was just an automatic add-on of being grown up, one of the privileges of being a grown-up, one of the fun things, one of the things grown-ups understood, but you didn't. I remember my brother and sister and I would come down from upstairs. They would put us to bed, but then we would sneak down and watch the grown-ups having a party because it was just cool. They had jazz music, they'd be laughing, and of course the place would be filled with smoke, absolutely choking with smoke. I mean, the room would be just thick with smoke. I remember the air being harsh, but I don't remember it really bothering me. There was very much a different thing then about growing up and this line that you would somehow cross, and then you would be an adult. Barbie and Ken were what you were aspired to be. You knew you weren't Barbie and Ken yet, but that was just what you wanted to be. That's why you played with them. And of course, I bet if you looked hard enough, you'd find some reference to cigarettes and old Ken stuff. Because Barbie and Ken were supposed to be grown-ups, so I don't know, did Ken smoke? When you turned on the news, the newscasters were puffing away. Everyone smoked. More often than not, the talk shows, Joey Bishop, Johnny Carson, all the guests, they'd be sitting there smoking their butts off. I always say, I don't have any strong fetishes. I don't think I have particularly strong. This element has to be present for things to be sexy fetishes. But cigarettes are one of those ones for me that like lingerie or satin sheets and a glass of champagne represents sort of romantic, sexy ideas. And cigarettes are right in there with that, to the point where if a woman was smoking with the right attitude, it could be just total boner material. Maybe it's because it's flirting with death, but a really erotic image would be a woman in lingerie and stockings and long gloves with a cigarette and a long holder as part of what she might lose once you were to get into it with her. The smoldering cigarette, the way you would smoke, if you smoked the right way, there would be a way to smoke that was just a part of who you were, what your whole attitude was. This was part of the self-image that you projected to the world. James Dean just sitting there leaning on his car, smoking. I mean, I'm straight, but that would just turn me on, I'm sure, if I were a gal. He was such a beautiful creature there, sitting around smoking. Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's with the gloves. That's where I think so much of that came from. And Playboy magazine would have sets like that. The chick would be, totally nude, and she would have long gloves on and be smoking. I used to look at my father's Playboy magazines that he hid. I would discover where they were by the time I was 8 or 9. That was part of growing up back then. You knew where Dad kept the Playboys. You knew where Dad kept the cigarettes. Bill pauses to tend to a modern-day stimulus such as a text message, and we drift back into the year 2012. What entices me so much about Bill's story is the direct contrast to the popular opinion about smoking today. Smoking has gone from a cool and popular thing to a bad and disgusting thing. What once stood as a symbol of glamour and sex appeal now exists as a symbol of rebellion and a rejection of all things proper. It is a really weird thing to think about, observe, and be a part of.
Waifette, an absolutely beautiful, beautiful reading, packed with nostalgia and the modern touch for, taking us to where we are now. And that nostalgia thing is a thing, and it's got to do with everything about the physicality, the aesthetics, it's the routine of it, the details of what you go through, the accessories, right? Yeah. It's all about that. Waifette, People can get the book on your website, which once again is?
Waifette.com/Cigarettiquette.
And Cigarettiquette is spelled? Actually, if they get to Waifette.com.
Yeah, if you get to Waifette.com, I actually have a tab that will say Cigarettiquette. You can click right on that.
You don't even have to spell it yourself.
It's very easy.
Waifette, Waifette.
Yep.
.com. And I think we're going to give away a couple of books, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sounds great. So thank you so much for joining us. If you guys, if you're smokers, if you want to give something to a smoker, if you're interested in civil liberties and freedom and nostalgia or anything, this is a fascinating, fascinating read, brilliantly written, really, really great stuff. Give us a call right now. We have 2 copies of the book, 631-632. 6901. That's 631-632-6901. Get a copy of Cigarettiquette by Waifette right here from WUSB Stony Brook. 631-632-6901. Waifette, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Finn. It's been excellent.
See you soon.